Um, yeah, let's start the talk. It's a talk about becoming productive .NET developers using Rider. Has any one of you heard of Rider before? Okay, most of you, cool. Who is using Rider on a day-to-day basis? Thank you. Awesome. Um, the talk is basically a tips and tricks type of talk where I introduce you to some features in Rider if you don't know about those features. Could be some features that you already know about, and okay, I will go over them anyway. But I do hope that everyone in this audience will leave the room knowing about Rider, what Rider is, and how you can do certain things in your development workflow to work faster and more productive in code. For the couple of hands who did not really say they use Rider on a day-to-day basis, if you don't know Rider, Rider is a full-featured .NET IDE. We try to be an alternative to Visual Studio and Visual Studio Codes by actually being a cross-platform .NET IDE. So a proper IDE, not just an editor, with all the features that you know and love from, for example, ReSharper. The idea is that we support C#, VB.NET, F#, everything around that, JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever you want to use in your applications that you are building. We try to support it the best as we can on all those different platforms, and we also try to make it productive, so refactorings, navigations, and so on, like we will see during this talk. Rider is based on ReSharper and IntelliJ, which means that you get ReSharper, which has been under development for years and years and years, so the experience from ReSharper comes to Rider, as well as the experience we gained from building IntelliJ, which is our front end we are using in Rider, and that has features like version control integration, task management, and so on. So we try to bring you the best of these two worlds that at JetBrains we've been developing for quite a while now. I mentioned an alternative to Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, which means we try to be a real IDE. We try to be lightweight and fast, just like VS Code, for example, but we also try to give you all the features that make you productive. It's not just about just writing codes, it's about the tooling around writing code, it's about navigating through your code base, running unit tests, installing NuGet packages and so on. Like really the day-to-day work you do, we try to improve and make it faster in Rider. Without further ado, I will switch to a demo, and I think that will be the next 45 minutes from now on. Right, so I have a couple of instances of Rider, and this is Rider. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's the UI of IntelliJ. You see a Solution Explorer on the left. It's the exact same solution files, project files that you have in Visual Studio, for example, so they are interoperable. And you can open any solution, any project you currently have, it will load in Rider, and you will see your code, your projects and files and so on. One of the main things we have in Rider, next to a lot of other main things as well, is strong navigation. We try to make it easy for you to navigate around your code base. That is by applying as many shortcuts as we can. If you don't want to learn all those shortcuts, there's actually two that you have to remember. One is Control-T. Control-T, and I will try to show you all the different shortcuts in this green bar at the bottom. Control-T is the search everywhere functionality. It searches through files, through classes, so both file system model as well as the code model in your application. It searches through settings, it searches through text, and so on. So it's really powerful and allows you to jump anywhere in your application quite quickly. So let's navigate to, I know there's a type called iViewEngine in my application. So as you can see, I start typing iView, and immediately you see iViewEngine is the first match we have there, and I can jump to my iViewEngine and navigate there and start working in this file. Another thing I could do is make use of some shortcuts. You've seen that iViewEngine has capital I, capital V, capital E in the name. Those are camel case, and I can use camel humps, so IVE, to search for the same iViewEngine. Because iViewEngine has these capital letters, I can just search for the capital letters and Rider will find it for me. So let's jump there again. From iViewEngine, I can of course navigate to members. So if I use Alt \, I can navigate to whatever I have in this class or interface and jump to the specific methods. What I can also do is make use of the navigate to shortcuts. And again, if you don't know the shortcut yet, you can just use Control-T and search for navigate. And it will find you the navigate to declaration, to base symbols, to whatever you want. If you're a more advanced user, you can just use the Alt _ shortcut and immediately navigate to, for example, the implementation. Now, one thing I want to show you is that everything in Rider, almost everything, is searchable. Every single pop-up you see, every single tool window you see, you can just start typing and Rider will search through it. So in here, I want to navigate to implementation. It's the first entry there, but imagine it would be another entry, like I want to navigate to usages of symbol. I can just start typing usages and it will search for me in this menu and bring me to the right entry immediately. But let's navigate to the implementation first. This iView engine has many implementations, as you can see. And again, in here, let's say I want to go to the Markdown view engine. I can again use these camel humps and say MDVE and search the Markdown view engine, navigate to my Markdown view engine. Of course, here I can do the same things, use the alt backslash to navigate to members of this class or jump back to my iView engine, for example. Right, what else do we have there? In our iView engine, we can do other navigations. For example, I want to find out where I'm making use of this iView engine. Again, we can navigate to finding usages of this symbol, and Rider will open a nice tool window where we can see all the different usages that are there. And from there, again, I can jump to whatever is the implementation and open it right from within this tool window. So quite nice. This is not the only navigation. If you're more of a mouse-oriented person, you can just control-click on whatever type you have in there, and we will navigate to the specific type. The nice thing is that this navigation also works for decompiling code. So if you're making use of a third-party library, say JSON.NET, or you want to look at the sources of the .NET framework for a specific type that you are using, you can just control-click on iDictionary, for example. We will decompile, and you will see the sources for iDictionary. Could be any third-party library that you are using in your projects. Right. As I mentioned, every single tool window and every single menu is searchable. So what I can also do is navigate to my Solution Explorer. And maybe you see it. There's a small 1 in front of the Solution Explorer label there. So I can use Alt plus the number of the tool window that you see in the UI and jump to my Solution Explorer, for example. And again, in here, if I want to navigate to, say, the caching project that I have in there, I can just start typing cache and jump to the caching. This is just one, so it automatically selects this one and I can jump to it. If I would say I am searching for hosting in here, I will find all the different hosting projects and can simply navigate between all of them using the arrow keys on my keyboard. So really fast to jump to a specific project and use the arrows to jump to whatever I have in files there. Right, other things we do is look at the source code you have. We try to build an entire syntax tree of your project and try to understand what you are doing and help you write better code. This is in two things. Of course, we will try to find out if you have a compiler error, for example. We will notify you about that. But also if we see something that looks odd or is maybe not correct, or maybe you can improve on. We also try to teach you how to use new language features in C#, for example. But let's give you a quick example in my test file here, program.cs. This one has a couple of issues. As you can see, the right circle there means that I have an error in there and this file will not compile at all. So as you can easily see, I'm returning a string here and I actually have to return an integer. So let's fix that and maybe return an integer. So we've done that now. This will compile, but as you can see, this red circle changed to a warning sign. So I still have some potential issues in this specific file. Let's look at those issues. There's 2 warnings and 1 suggestion. We can navigate through them and we can see, for example, that this with the green squiggle underneath the return is a suggestion. And it says, okay, this is an inconsistent body style. I'm using C# 7.1 in this project, and it sort of advises me to make use of expression-bodied members here. So what I can simply do is Alt-Enter on these, and not on my integer, of course, but on the return statement, and make it an expression-bodied property. Works like this, and it will update this for me. Nice thing is, if I undo, and I want to do this on all the different classes that I have in my current file, project, or solution, I can do an update for the entire solution if I want. If I want to keep this or maybe make it an error for my colleagues, what I can do is say, okay, this is an error, and if you're using anything that is not an expression-bodied member, your colleagues will have the same settings and they will see a warning or an error instead, and you will actually see that things are broken. I see a question there?
Yeah, Visual Studio 2017 is moving to the editor config. Does Rider support it as well, or is it in the pipeline?
Yeah, so the question is, do we support editor config? And the answer to that is simply yes. Yeah, cool. So this is now an error, so obviously I have to fix this and make this an expression-bodied property. The issue with that is that right now all my properties that I have in my solution will break, so I will make this a suggestion instead again. If it works. I think your question messed up my nightly build. Awesome. Okay, let's ignore that one. I can actually collapse it so the error is gone. And continue the work here, right? There's a couple of other inspections, of course. If I actually cannot type. Let's do the good thing and restart Rider, or reopen my solution that I had. There we go. As you can see, Rider is really fast at opening solutions. So it may still crash, but it's really fast at crashing and recovering. So that's also a good help, I guess. Right. Always goes wrong on these things. Anyway, as you can see, it loads quite fast and I can start writing code immediately. But you see the syntax highlighting is still missing. The trick we do with making it fast is we only parse incrementally and we start adding the different features while it's still loading. But you can start typing immediately, basically. So let's do another thing. Let's add a string, call it foo, and add a value in there, test or whatever. As you can see, I have now a new error in here. Why? I configured my code style settings. You could do this with editor config as well. I added code style settings where I say, okay, my code style should be use var everywhere, so I can make this use var. And I should stop making use of nightly builds, apparently. Jesus. Right, let's do this one more time. Third time's a charm, and close these other ones, because that's probably going to be the issue. I must warn you, I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains, which means I get to do cool demos and everyone is amazed by how well things work. So you look over there, there's the camera. And I will do this thing in the background for a second. Right. The thing about being a developer advocate is that you're always talking about the new features. How do you try the new features in nightly builds? And this is what you get for using nightly builds. Anyway, let's try once more. And there we go. It's loading and I can jump to my program.cs. As you can see, again, it's loading incrementally. It's giving me navigation on the file system, not yet by class, but still I can already start working whilst things are still loading in my application. Let's steer clear of these guys and look at the other things that are in there. As you can see, there's more inspections as well. So for example, I'm using inheritance here. I have a hello world class that is my base class. And I have a cool hello world, which says yo instead of hello world. I have an inspection there that says, okay, you are overriding the XML documentation, but it's actually not correct. So it actually says, okay, if you want, please add inherit doc there. So we try to really improve both your code and things that will obviously break when you are compiling. All right, let's skip over this part and go to something more interesting that will probably work. Let's add a new file in there and add a class. One of the things that Rider also provides is code generation. So imagine I'm building an application and I want to add a person somewhere in my application as a model that I want to work with. I want to add it to source control, yes. And let's add some properties. Let's add an ID because I want to store this in a database and databases like IDs. Let's add maybe a name as well as a string. And also nice is to add the H. And I should have used the shortcut there as well. All right, there we go. The nice thing is, this is all the code that I will be writing in this person. Typically, writing these classes is more language ceremony than it is actually contributing to your development workflow. So basically, I just want to make sure that I have a name, an age, and an ID, and that is all I want to have there. All else can be generated. I can use the Alt Insert menu and generate, for example, a constructor. I can select the different properties that I want to initialize from my constructor. And I can also say, okay, this should be a protected, private, internal, or whatever. And I can add null checks to my constructor as well. If I generate this, I get a nice constructor. And because I'm in C#7 language mode, I will actually get the throw expression there as well. If you're in C#6, for example, it will add a nice if-then statement and do it else way. Now, of course, I still had to do a couple of clicks in there. I really want to speed up my coding. So instead of using the Alt Insert menu, what I can do is use the shorthand CTOR, which you have in other IDEs as well. But we detect that there's public properties in this class as well. So if we type CTOR P and tab, we generate the exact same thing. CTOR constructor for public properties in this case. Let's add some more things. I have my person, and I also want to add some equality members. I want to be able to compare two persons so I can see if it's the same object in my code or not. Let's compare by ID and maybe do something crazy and also add name to the comparison. If the name and the ID are the same, then I want the objects to be the same. So that means I should implement get hash code. I should probably implement an equals method as well. And maybe I can also make this an I-equatable object. So I can add the I-equatable interface as well. Let's say I want to compare using ignoring case. So because I'm comparing the name property, which is a string, I will ignore the casing of the name in this case. Let's generate. And as you can see, we now have an equals, a get hash code, and so on. Let's add some more. I want to compare if someone is older than someone else. So what I want to add is some relational members where I can compare, in this case, by age. And I also want to overload the relational operators so that I can do something like if person A larger than person B, write code like that. So I can do this. Again, I can select to ignore the casing, for example, if I would be using strings, but that's not the case. Let's generate, and now I have a compare to, and I have all these operators overloaded without writing any codes. Kinda nice, right? Typically, the next thing that will happen is that someone copies this class and starts adapting the properties. Again, that's not the way to go. Just write the properties and generate whatever else you have in there. Let's add maybe a picture of the person into this class. So let's add another property, which will be a stream, and that will be a photo. Now, as you know, a stream is idisposable. So that means I should be implementing idisposable on my person as well. Probably not the best example to do this on a model object, but you get the idea, right? What I can do is add an idisposable. And you see, again, there's an error because I didn't implement idisposable yet. And what I can do is implement missing members. Let's do that. And I get this nice not implemented exception, and normally I would start writing codes. Rider is smarter than this. It knows about idisposable, and instead of generating just the interface implementation, something's really fishy here, so let's remove it by hand. Probably the presentation assistant plugin still. So let's generate a dispose pattern instead. Rider recognized that I'm using idisposable and that there's a stream object in my own class. So what I can do is generate a dispose pattern using photo as a disposable that is embedded in my class. Based on what you are using in your class, like for example unsafe code or COM objects or whatever, this will look slightly different. But the general idea is that Rider detects what you want to do and helps you doing that more perfectly or more fast. So let's say fields can be null and I want to dispose my photo. This happens, and again, because of the language version, Rider knows that it can use the Elvis operator there to dispose in my dispose methods. So again, easy to generate. Anyone using iNotify property changed in their codes? Yeah, a couple of people. It's hell to implement, right? You have to do this proper backing fields, property change notification, and so on. That's an approach. The other one is to again generate it, and I can use, for example, an iNotify property changed. And Rider knows about this class. So again, I can implement it. And if I implement iNotify property changed, what will happen is Rider adds the onPropertyChanged methods invocation method as well, with null checking and all those things too. And the nice thing is, because I'm now iNotifyPropertyChanged, it will actually give me new context actions on properties like my ID or my name. So let's make name an iNotifyPropertyChanged one. Alt-Enter, which does not work, so I will fake it. I can make it a property with change notification in this case. So let's do that. We now have a backing field. We have a getter that returns the backing field, and our setter will call into onPropertyChanged in this case. So we generate again based on the information that Rider is able to deduce from the project that I have. Right, I'm going to do one thing, that is disable the presentation assistant, because I think that's the cause of what I'm seeing here. So I will tell you the keyboard shortcuts. Where is it? Like I said, everything is searchable. So again, in settings, typically everything is searchable as well. And then I have to restart Rider, but that was something that I was going to do anyway. Yeah, I think that was one of the cases, but I know presentation assistant sometimes interferes with it as well. So let's try a better approach in this case. Right, refactorings. Rider also uses all the different refactorings that are available in ReSharper, both for JavaScript and TypeScript, as well as C#, VB.NET, and so on. So what I can do is simple things like a rename. So let's rename, Control-RR, and I can make my name, for example, display name, maybe. Do that. It will check the related symbols, so it will also update my backing field. And if I would have duck comments or even regular comments where I say something like to do update name property, it will also update the comment there. Because typically comments lie because they are old. It will update it for me. Right, let's go. And I now have a display name here. And I will also take your suggestion and make this a suggestion. Awesome. Other refactorings that are available are things like moving stuff. So what I can do is Control-Shift-R, which is refactor this. And you will see all the different refactorings that are available in this context because my cursor is on the person class name there. I can move this one to a folder or to a different namespace. And if I do the move, the namespace will be updated everywhere that I'm using this specific class. So that's quite a nice refactoring. I can extract an interface, do a save delete. So instead of just deleting the file, if I do a save delete, Rider will tell me if it's in use or not, which can also help if you want to do something. A couple more refactorings in there, I would say feel free to try them out after this session. Let's move on to editing. I will open a new project for that. A nice web application. Right, so we've seen that we can generate some codes using the Alt-Insert menu. The thing is that we can also help Rider understand our code better. So I have an MVC application here. Anyone building MVC apps? Okay, awesome. You know you have controllers and views, right? And typically what you do is build some extension methods. So for example, what you could build is something that generates a login URL. So what I did was create an extension method on an HTML helper that generates the link to the login page for me and adds a return URL as a route value. This method takes a controller name and an action. Now, one of my devs, not me because I write perfect code all the time, of course, added the login link to a view and did this. Remember the parameters that I had there where I took the controller first and the action second? Well, I here passed the action and then the controller. So this will obviously break if I start writing code. Yet, Rider is happy with it and I will only discover this at runtime. Except, if I change my signature of my extension method to instead of just taking the controller and the action, to add an annotation there, which is called ASP MVC Controller and ASP MVC Action, Rider knows that this string means it's a controller or an action. And if I now go to my view, you will see that in my layout, this actually shows an error because the index controller does not exist and the home action does not exist either. And I can start updating this. And if I invoke auto-completion, you will see the controller names there as well. So I can add home there, and instead of home as the action, I will add the index action of my home controller. If I place my cursor right, yeah, there we go. You see all the actions of the home controller there. So I can really help Rider understand what I want to achieve and make it better. Nice thing is, by doing this, I also get navigation. I have a string here. If I control click on this home, I will jump to my home controller. So that's also a nice added value of adding these annotations. There's annotations for MVC framework. There's things for null checks and so on. So you can, if you look on our website, there's, I think, 200 something annotations that you can use to make Rider understand your code better. It does alt-enter renaming as well. So if I would rename my index action, for example, to home or hello or whatever, it will also update the string usages because it knows it's an actual action of a controller. Right. Language injections, another nice one. Who of you ever writes code where you embed another language inside a string? Like a JavaScript variable where you embed some HTML to write some jQuery or whatever, or maybe do some CSS and so on. I know you are doing like this. It's not something we want to do as developers, but sometimes we have to do it. So Rider helps you do the wrong thing in the right way, so to speak. So let's say I have a string, and this should contain JSON. What I can do is mark this string as being an injected language of the type JSON, or a path reference, or CSS, or JavaScript, or XML, or whatever. Maybe, let's say, instead of JSON, let's say CSS. What I can now do is start writing some CSS. I even get code completion of the CSS inside this string, which is kind of nice. And I also get the nice things like color pickers and so on. I can do refactorings on this, and it will understand what is happening. If I have a syntax error, and I say color or core or whatever, it will actually tell me that this does not exist, and so on. I can, of course, remove this again, and ideally remove this entire code, but you never know when you will need it. Right. Let's maybe validate something in our code here. Let's say the controller name has to conform to a certain regular expression. Again, what I could do is do something like if not regex.isMatch of my source controller, and I want to add a regex. What Rider does is it actually knows about the regex type, and it will know that the string I have to pass here accepts a regular expression, and it will already give me like helpful hints on how I can write regular expressions. If I add an A to Z and I say this can only be somewhere between 1 and 99 characters, you will see that will actually highlight the regular expression automatically as well. So again, helping you write embedded languages. Yes? Then you will see a syntax error or a runtime error. Depends a little bit. So the best way is always to use Rider or ReSharper to do this, of course. Right, that's another one. What else do we have? Postfix completion, a really nice feature. Have you built it? No? No, you're a fan, right. Let's say we have a range of an enumerable, and let's say we want to add an enumerable dot range of something between 1 and 100. What I can do is imagine I want to do a for each over this range. Typically what you would do is write a for each and then say range and then say could be a var or maybe an int and maybe item or something like that. Lots of ceremony again to work with the language. Using postfix completion, Rider actually understands what we want to achieve. So if we say range dot for each, it actually completes the entire thing for us immediately, which is kind of nice as well. Works with ifs, works with null checks, works with switch statements, with a lot of things to really help you, again, lose the clutter that the language forces you into. Right, what else do we have? Is this? No, this one does not have that example. Let's maybe create a Scratch file. How many times have you opened Notepad next to your development environment to do some copy pasting, and maybe you even use Notepad as a service bus between rich text and plain text and things like that? What you can do is create a scratch file in Rider. So instead of using Notepad, you can just do Control-Shift-Alt-Insert, very elaborate, and create a scratch for a certain file type that you want to create. So I can create a scratch for C#, for example, and I will get syntax highlighting even for my temporary file that I want to create. I can create a text file, I can create a CSS file, or whatever. I can just open it, start writing whatever I want to do, add a namespace, I get completion in my temporary file, and so on. Maybe if I don't want to use this, the scratch file will just disappear. If eventually I want to use it, I can just save as, add it to my solution, and I'm good to go. So scratch files. Another nice one is multiple cursors. Really nice, I think. Imagine I'm building an API, and instead of just using the defaults of my home controller here, I want to add an HTTP GET to this. Really force that this should be called using a GET method in my controller. Again, what I can do is use multiple cursors, Control, Shift, Alt, and clicking. Click right in front of my public methods that I have there, and just start typing. I get multiple cursors, even with completion. So if I complete with HTTP GET, I will get completion for that, and done. Add an enter, again, done. Quite nice, I think. A nice way to abuse this thing is typically you get a nice list of countries that you have to add to an array, and typically it looks something like NL, BE, FR, whatever, and you have to make this into an array. Again, I can use multiple cursors to add the cursors right in front of my languages, add quotes, add more quotes, add a comma, and my array is almost done. So again, nice useful feature to make your work faster and smarter. Multiple cursors are not in ReSharper, no. Scratches also not, no. Right, okay, next one, version control. Of course, we have to check in our code eventually and work with version control. We have a nice fast version control system in Rider, so let's use this one. Have you ever had to search through the log of items in version control? Look at a certain commit or find something in there. Typically, depending on the client you use, it's kind of horrible to search through that entire list because it takes quite a lot of time. In Rider, we try to cache whatever is in there. So if I search for routing, for example, I will find all the commits that contain the word route. I can navigate through them, look at the diffs, look at the check-in comment, and so on, which is really fast. I can check in my files, of course, to source control. I can add a commit message, look at the diffs in this dialog as well. But I can also do some things like do some minor cleaning of my code when I want to commit. So for example, I can optimize imports, maybe do a reformat or rearrange of my code when I commit, and check for to-dos. Many of us use to-dos or review comments or whatever. If you check for to-dos, Rider will give you a warning saying, look, I know you want to commit, but you still have some to-dos. Maybe you should fix the code first. So Rider helps you in fixing your code first. Right, what else is in there? A nice annotate or blame or whatever you want to call it methods. So let's take a random file. Let's maybe take our iView engine. What I can do here is I don't know the shortcut to annotate or look at who made which change to this file. What I can do is Alt-Enter or again Control-T and just start typing. So let's say annotate. I will find Git annotations and I can annotate. Enter, of course. Have you seen how fast this is? Again, we try to cache many things there and it's really fast to enable or disable and it just shows you or hides the annotation there. Another nice thing we have in version control is the concept of change lists. How many of you multitask when they develop? I hear lots of laughs, so I think everyone. What you can do is create a change list for a specific task you are working on. You can link it to a Git task, for example, or to a TFS task or whatever, or just create a random change list. So let's say doing talk as a change list. And what will happen is that if I activate this change list, if I set it to active, all the changes that I make will be tracked under this one. And if you do multitasking, we will actually keep track of the different blocks of code that you are changing within a specific task. And when you commit, we will just commit the changes for that specific task instead of the entire thing where you still have to figure out, okay, this file was this file was this task, and so on. Yeah. It works for multiple changes in one file, although it will probably mess with your mind, and yeah, because you're multitasking in one file and maybe you forget to switch and so on, so it typically gets messy, but yes, it works. Yeah. All right, let's delete this change list and go to default again. Right, another nice scenario is in the morning, I'm on the subway and I'm working on a bug report that got sent through email somewhere during the night by a colleague. And let's say I start writing a simple class, let's say bar, because that's where I was yesterday evening. Add a void foo, write some code. Code goes here. Glenn is still in the room, he's the master delegator. Ask someone to write code. Awesome, I wrote my code. Then I go to the office, I arrive in the office, let's add an E as well. I go to the office and then a colleague comes to me and asks me to work on something else. And I open my IDE and I think this class bar, I know I was working on this, but it's not so important, so let's maybe remove it again. I do my day-to-day job, maybe restart Rider a couple of times or restart my PC or whatever. And in the evening I realized, okay, this thing I was working on this morning, I want to continue work on that, but I didn't branch, I didn't shelve, I didn't store it anywhere. What Rider gives you is local history, where I can go to the local history, show history of my file, and what I will see is every single change that I made over the day, even yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before, and I can see in a diff view that I can restore this class bar. Nice thing is, these are editable as well, so I can edit in my diff, and I also get the inspections in there. So if I want to merge something from a previous day or a previous change, I will see if it actually influences my warnings and inspections that I have in there. It's an additional, an incremental change. So in this case, if I add this again, my previous one will be the one where it was removed. So it will just pile them on top. Nice thing is this works per file, but also on the project level. So if you create a new project to play with or try with, it will also keep track of that. Another really nice thing about this is if I copy the path to this file and I make an external change to the file, let's open the file in Notepad, because that's what real developers use. No. Let's add, yeah, maybe another comment, demo. If I save this, of course, Rider will reload, but it will also keep track of this external change in local history. Not at the line level, because Rider is obviously not running when I'm using Notepad, but will still keep track of all the different changes that happen between starting Rider again. Right, what else do we have? So many things. The debugger, I have another session tomorrow. If you want to learn about the debugger, please come to that one so I can skip the demos there. But for now, remember, we have a debugger in Rider. Some other things we have, a nice database editor. And I know some other IDEs have this as well, but we have a couple of really nice things in there. The database editor can connect to pretty much any data source that you want to work with, like an Azure SQL database or SQLite or MySQL or whatever you want to do there. I created a very simple SQLite database with a person and address and a foreign key between person and address where my person can reference an address in the other table. What I get is, of course, I can modify my table and it all looks like script, but it's actually UI where I can set specific options if I click the specific column. But we give you the preview of what the code would look like if you actually want to generate this or create this table, for example. We have those things. We have a nice editor where you can open the data in the table. So let's open our address. We will see all the different addresses. And Windows Firewall wants to play along. We can see all the different addresses that are in there. We can, of course, add new ones, export them to CSV and so on. Nice touch is that we can also export to other file types. So if you want to export, for example, to JSON or to SQL inserts or updates, we can generate those for you as well, which is kind of nice, I think. Another nice one is that we do code completion as well. So since we scan the entire query or the entire database and we know about your foreign keys and so on, what I can do is write a query where I select the person and the address together with a join. If I want to complete my unjoin, it will automatically detect this is the only foreign key that I have in this case and suggest me to just complete with that foreign key. Works with simple one-to-one relationships, one-to-many, many-to-many, and so on. If you have multiple foreign keys, you'll just see them all in there and you can just complete and run the query. Right, 5 more minutes. I could have shown debugging, maybe short. Other things in there, a really fast NuGet client. Again, it's not showing, but again, I can use Control-T and search for NuGet, and it searches in NuGet in tool windows and settings as well, so let's jump to the NuGet clients. The NuGet client, it looks a bit different, but we use some caching techniques and smart querying techniques to make it faster. So anyone give me an obscure package name that you use? Which one? NBuilder. Let's search for it. Have you seen how fast this was? I was still typing it and it's already there. So that's quite nice. Just like in other IDEs, I can see the frameworks, I can see info, select the version I want to install, update and install and so on. Nice thing is, if anyone using private feeds in their company? Okay, a couple. You can configure multiple package sources and you can select the configuration file where you want to add them. I can add a package source with a name and a URL, but also username and password, which Rider will store in its internal credential cache. Nice thing is, if I have multiple config files or multiple sources, I also get the effective NuGet config. You can actually see what the NuGet client sees when it tries to restore packages, and you will see all the different package sources that are available from the different configuration files on your system. Anyone with a disk that is almost full on their system? A good chance is the NuGet client or NPM cache. Have a lot of packages stored on your system. We have a tab where you can manage the NuGet cache as well. You can see the size of it. You can auto clear when Rider starts or clear them manually if you just want to remove something when you're working with this. And of course, a log file as well. Yeah. If you want to temporarily disable one, you just select it and comment it out. So right now it's not possible to just add a check mark there, but
You have one private repository that has a different address depending on whether you're inside or outside the company.
yeah, you could just fill in the config file. Yeah. Yeah. No, unfortunately not. Something else we have in there. Anyone building APIs? I guess many are. Right, we have a built-in REST client. So if you want to craft requests to, for example, GitHub, what I can do is just call the GitHub API, add some headers and so on in there, request parameters. If I want to send file contents, I can do so as well, and just issue the request and get back a nice response. I'm saying nice response, but this is not a nice response because I cannot read unformatted JSON, and I hope nobody can because it's strange. But what I can do is format my response here and just click the button and see the JSON that comes back. Can do the same thing with HTML and XML, for example. Also, if you get back HTML from an API, you can also open it in the browser. Nice touch here is that we also allow you to import and export requests. So if you have an API that you're building internally and you want to share these requests, pre-made requests with colleagues, you can do so. And for example, just import or export one of those requests. Basic authentication, similar thing. We do not show you the actual header. Well, we actually show you the header value, but we allow you to generate it in here as well. What else do we have? Too many things. A built-in terminal. Yes?
Can you also build tests with your REST client?
Not yet. In the next version of Rider, well, actually the next version, which will be somewhere December, I guess, we will have the option to just create a file where you type like a get google.com, where you can alt-enter and run the request in the client. So if you have this file with a number of pre-made requests, you can do something like that. It's not a real test, but it's more useful or easier to work with than this one. Built-in console. Of course, you can use built-in console and do whatever you want there. Maybe a tip that nobody knows about or too few know about is that in the terminal, you can actually select the shell you want to use. So if you're a PowerShell fan, and I know there's one in the room there, you can make this PowerShell, or even Bash for Windows if you want, or Git Bash or whatever shell you want to use there. And what will happen is if you open a new terminal, voila, we have PowerShell as a terminal in Rider. What else? Since we are built on ReSharper and IntelliJ, we have a really large plugin repository. So all the plugins that you can install in Rider are basically IntelliJ plugins for a lot of things. So I can install some that we created at JetBrains. So if you want to do Angular JS development, we have some additional templating and so on that you can install. Same thing with Docker integration and so on. Another thing you can do is browse the repositories and install nice things like the Nyan progress bar. And I think that's a nice one to end on. So let's restart Rider, and you can see what this plugin does. It's the most awesome plugin ever if you use another IDE. Wait for it. Let's open our big solution again. And all of our progress bars are now really nice looking. All right, with that, I'm over time, so let's close here. And again, tomorrow another session on debugging if you're interested. And for now, just remember, Rider is a new IDE on the block. We try to do a lot of things in a lightweight IDE that uses ReSharper as the engine, so you get all those features, IntelliJ as well. Cross-platform, whether you're using Mac, Linux, or Windows, it will work on there. And all the features that I've showed you are just the tip of the iceberg in there. With that, thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.